Take it away, guys.
All right, let me get my screen shared here. I've been listening and you guys have been doing great. It's a super informative event, and on behalf of all ESG, really appreciate you guys and inviting us along. It's certainly a topic that's been near and dear to my heart for many years. I will have to say guilty as charged. I was in IT for many years, and I'd be the one that says, look at this great technology, let's just go use it. And then I would suffer on the nights and weekends that I had to support it. So guilty as charged, and I'm sure we'll get into some of these discussions as we go. For those of you that don't know ESG, we're an analyst consulting firm operating as a division of TechTarget. I've been with the firm for over 15 years now. Have 20 plus years of IT practitioner experience, spent a lot of time as an IT director. So a lot of these, I'll say, challenges or these benefits, I've certainly lived through them. And Richard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, Mark. Good to be with you as always. And for the folks who don't know me, I've been with Login BSI for about 4 years. I've been responsible for our business in North America. And before that, I've been in early stage businesses in the greater Boston area for probably the last 20 years. Despite the funny accent, I am a US citizen and proud to be here.
Sure. So Richard, let me kind of zip and buzz through a couple slides just from a research perspective. By all means, chime in if you're seeing anything else from a customer perspective or things that you see.
And I think we wanted to set this up, Mark, as kind of a, you've got some research and I'm going to color in, as we see the industry and things from a customer perspective. So I'm excited to run this format, see how folks think of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're old friends and old pros at this,
exactly.
So I appreciate you kind of going along with it for sure. So a lot of the research that I'll do, I spend a lot of my days really kind of looking out, kind of what's out the windshield, what are some of those key trends in the market, what are some of that buying behavior, where are folks putting investment? And there's no question, these are 4 areas I spent a lot of time on over the last really 18, 24 months. And one of them is the only constant is change. The rate of change has been unbelievable. Even in this specific, I'll say space, digital workspace in general, VDI type of technologies. It's amazing. It wasn't that long ago we talk about, this is a niche use case, and now it's, this technology actually is here to stay and works really well. Certainly driven by hybrid work from home mandates. The other one that I think has really changed, and this will certainly come into our conversation, Richard, is user satisfaction, right?
Absolutely.
In the past, it was, we could get away with less than, I'll say, happy users. And a lot of times that was just due to the case, well, that user can walk over to a help desk or support desk or, meet in the cafeteria or lunch area and kind of get that support. And now, that IT person isn't rolling up to your house to provide support.
Well, and you don't know what they're at the end of, right? Could be a workstation at home, could be in an office, could be in a hotel room like I am right now. It could be anywhere in the world, right? And of course, when somebody calls and says, my application is slow, what does that mean, right? Where are you? What does it normally look like? When did it get slow? How much slower than normal is it? Is it just that application is slow? There's a whole ton of context around that statement. And usually end users are notoriously poor at defining the problem statement. And just in validation of your comment here, my colleague and our MC, Mark Plettenberg, and some of the other speakers on this event run a metric every year called VDI Like a Pro. For those of you who haven't seen it before, go check it out. Really interesting data. But that research also validates that our users expect about 50% of their population will be in a permanent work from home, scenario going forward. So, we see this now as the new reality, and that definition of user experience is so volatile based on, the context of where that user is calling from.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I've got some research here to share as well as, one of the things when we started to do some research around the kind of the turn of the, I'll say, work from home or remote work kind of mandate stuff, we found that, the value of technology, even from an IT executive perspective, is 60% saying, you know what, this situation's made us more reliable on technology than we ever have been in the past. And then just to your point, right? 57%, and I believe you just said kind of 50%, 57%, I believe it's even growing more, they've kind of experienced some success, and they're, more interest of kind of what that work kind of situation, work location will really be. And at the end of the day, you have to be prepared for all of them, right? It's not going to be, as much as a lot of us like to get back to the office, the situation is you got to prepare for all those different scenarios.
100%. And, it's really interesting. One of the applications we see more and more coming up in our proofs of concept that we do with customers is unified communication. So you would think, if it's going to be a hospital, it's going to be their patient management system. If it's a bank, it's going to be, a mortgage system or whatever it is. And it is, but across the board, irrespective of what industry our clients are in, we are seeing unified communications be, one of the most critical business applications that people want to test. And what's ironic about that, of course, is it's delivered from the cloud. And so this argument of, well, everything is moving to SaaS, everything's moving to cloud. How important is testing? Well, try telling your 4,000 or 12,000 or 50,000 people who can't work on Monday morning after an update to, fill in the blank EUC system that it's all in the cloud, so therefore not a problem, right?
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I mean, I just looked at the other slide, right? And I look at those top 5 priorities, right? Look at number 1, exactly what you said, that idea around collaboration. And you'd like to think that people have gotten it right. But to your point, one, I noticed in that space, so many new features are coming at businesses at a rapid pace. And when they come at them, it's a matter of, 1, do the users know how to use it? So you got to kind of get over that. And then 2, is you're right. Is it available? Is it going to work when I need it? Right. Is the connection there? Is the experience there? Are people to get worked on? Then the other things we see is certainly security and device settings, being able to support those different environments, as we've said before. The other one is patterns, right? People want to identify, how are people working effectively? How are they working well with each other? How can they replicate that across other areas of the businesses? How can they identify top performers and kind of be able to make sure they can still deliver that level of experience? And ultimately, that all comes down to the last one, right? They want to be able to manage, right, the apps and access to the devices and apps.
And many of these are highly in conflict with each other. So great to want to be highly secure and at the same time have excellent user collaboration, right? And many of these other things. I did a quick look the other day. We're in week 37 and looking at 10 of the companies that are probably prevalent in 90% of the enterprises. There's already been 24 zero-day vulnerabilities that were identified on a recent report I saw. And so that's almost a rate, not quite one a week, but pretty darn close. So you've got this 4-headed monster you're trying to deal with. You've got to go faster. You now have more changes than you ever had. You've got a bigger population, so an impact is now even bigger issue. Oh, and could you do all that while driving down your price per desktop, please, right? So the demands in this area to try to somehow harmonize those 4 highly convicting problems, more change, go faster, more people, and be cheaper. That's quite the job to deliver on this set of requirements that the business is kind of expecting.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. One of the things that we've kind of have been looking across general is, you would think with things like cloud consumption, Richard, there's an easy button. All right, hey, cloud just gives me the easy button. No way, right? 75% of people say that believe that IT complexity has increased over the last 2 years, right? So how do you kind of match those things? And then to your point, well, guess what? That's followed by 77% of people saying, hey, we've got this desktop or hosted desktop footprint in place, and we're going to continue to do that. And 46% saying, listen, we believe that the majority of environment are going to be comprised of hosted desktops. And I just see, as I ask that question further, it just continues to get bigger. So there's no easy button. And you're right, it's a higher, I'll say, on the IT or CIO's whiteboard than it ever has been.
Yeah, and I've been in this industry for about 30 years. So I'm probably the granddad of this event right now. And I will tell you that in that entire period, I've never met a CIO who wanted to be in the desktop business. Everybody has been dying to get out of this space for as long as I can remember, back all the way to Windows 97 and earlier, right? Windows 3. So the allure of desktops in the cloud is incredibly interesting to people, but the devil in the details around, the cost models and multi-user versus single user, many of the, I'm sure, configuration things that my colleagues and guest speakers will be and have been speaking about. That's where all the wars will be won and lost. And so, it's not there is no easy button, to go back to your opening comment.
Yeah, no, it's so true. So, one of the things that we certainly seen in IT for years, right? We've seen this idea about, and there's a place for this, right? Being able to have alerting and monitoring in place and having the stoplight, right? Now, I'm going to tell you, we used to have these tools and there's a lot of red lights and we kind of ignore them because, yeah, we know what that's about. It'll be okay. And then all of a sudden, knock, 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 you get some, user or some department coming to us and saying, hey, listen, this is broken. We'd be like, oh yeah, we've seen that and we got to kind of fix it. So they're good, right? But a lot of times they're reactive. A lot of times it's a lot of different tools. You have to bring other people together. And in many cases, traditionally, it's been really primarily focused on that infrastructure. So important to have, but really not solving all the issues that we're talking about here today, right?
Absolutely, and we love our friends at ESG, but one of the other folks in the analyst space have made a comment, and we co-opted it because we think it's great. It said that testing is the new monitoring, and this is not to take from the folks in the monitoring space. And I think we even have some sponsors on. We think this is a critically important set of technologies that every enterprise needs in their environment. But it's not the same as testing. It's different from testing. And in many ways, they're very collaborative and complementary. Monitoring lives in production. It does its job consuming machine data, looking at the performance of that infrastructure, and primarily when there are users running on that infrastructure is when most of its data is going to be relevant. Testing primarily lives in pre-production, and it is designed to catch problems before they get to the infrastructure. And where we creep into production with our what we would think of as continuous testing, it's really designed to support times when there aren't users in your environment. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is the test and verify scenario. You want to test all of your changes. You're going to do your promotion to production at 1 a.m. At 1:05, you want to know that every store in your business, every airport in your network, every hospital, in your community is available, and that those users can work. You don't want to wait till 6:30 or 7 a.m. for those users to start calling in when you could have figured it out, 5 minutes after your changes. And then, God forbid, you did have to roll back. You have an ability to do that without really causing a major disruption and test that rollback, which in many cases can also become a bit of an Achilles heel. So we see absolutely the need for monitoring, but we see testing as a very different discipline. And I think the industry is really starting to wake up to this difference.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to me. I thought what you do is you just throw more infrastructure at it. I thought that was always the way this works.
That's right. That's right.
And I kid in some respect, but we've done this for years, right? Where we've kind of tested some of those infrastructure, whether it be on-prem or hosted kind of from some third party. And there's certainly instances where scale matters and being able to, I'll say, throw more infrastructure at it does help in certain scenarios. But right, infrastructure shouldn't be the QA process, right? If you see, things aren't performing as well as they should be, the idea shouldn't be to say, all right, let's turn on more virtual machines or buy more hardware to actually solve the problem, to your point, right? You can't do that at 2 a.m.
I literally spoke, well, that's correct. Yeah. And even if you can in the cloud, I'm guessing your CFO is going to want to have a conversation about that. And I spoke recently with a large hospital, and I was really kind of surprised to hear their mentality, which seemed like something from quite a window ago in my mind. They run at 3 times the amount of infrastructure that they know they need, simply so that if they ever roll out an issue in an application where it is, resource intensive, memory leak, whatever, they're never going to run out of capacity. If you do that, on a continuous basis, 10 years ago, you were probably talking about tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of infrastructure. You're probably today talking about millions of dollars of infrastructure in a large hospital environment. And the challenge, of course, with going to the cloud is you don't get to just kind of run out. You don't hit that hard ceiling until the bill comes at the end of the month. We see in that VDI Like a Pro survey, 50% of respondents still saying that they don't test. for a bunch of reasons. They don't have time, they don't have a lab, they don't have budget, they don't have resources. But really, in my mind, the question is becoming at an executive level, if you don't have time to test, how are you going to have time to fix it? How are you going to afford it? How do you not have time and resource to test? It's really Russian roulette at this stage. You've got not a week goes by without a zero-day vulnerability. You've got tens of thousands of people that are at the other end of this change that you're about to roll out. I think it's getting to the point of dereliction of duty to not have data. And I used to be a bit like yourself on the buy side. I spent the first decade of my career. It's been a long time. But I sat in a Friday afternoon meeting for 4 hours while we would go through changes. And to my horror, 20 years later, those meetings are still continuing. And the people who know the least about the changes are in the most senior positions, in many cases making the calls, and they have almost no data. It is a whole bunch of conversation. And I wrote a blog post a while back that basically said, the whole change management, change advisory board, it's a little bit like the emperor has no clothes. Somebody just needs to stand up and say, this is a complete waste of time. We've got to change this to a data-driven, exception-driven process. So we're only talking about the things that we have tested that have failed this gauntlet of tests. Otherwise, it's just all for show.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, I think IT professionals are nicer to themselves, meaning that if 50% of people are saying that they're testing, I wonder to what degree they're testing as well,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm guilty, right? I'll be the first
Absolutely.
person, I'm guilty, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's always, and sometimes you don't know, and it's to your point here, and I think this is kind of a good kind of discussion to have around here is, there's certain areas, to your point, where people have have overlooked a lot of this testing, and there's certain areas here where if you look at it from a pre-production standpoint, I think some of it people kind of get or are more comfortable with, right? So if you look at it from an OS perspective or configuration changes, they're a little bit more apt to do this, but I think when it comes to third-party software, internal development, they're kind of I'll say missing may not be the right word. They're going faster by these pieces than are necessary, which is only causing them problems down the road. Right?
Absolutely. We go to clients, they talk about DevOps, and the CIO thinks they're doing DevOps, but of course, all of us in the EUC space knows that nothing changes until that icon is changed on the desktop, right? That's actually when you're in production. The fact that a developer tested it 4 weeks ago after a 2-week cycle and it passed on his or her desktop, that doesn't mean it's not going to cause an issue. And I compare this to going into a lab where there's a whole bunch of bottles of stuff, and individually they're all quite stable. And you get a beaker and you take a couple of them off the shelf and you pour them together and you see what happens, right? Because the sands are shifting. The test that the developer did on their homegrown app was on last week's build, not this week's build that we're about to put out into production. So who knows where the inconsistency between a security patch and an application or an OS configuration and something else is going to jump up and bite us. And so you need that very last full integration suite of testing that really isn't happening. I ask CIOs about testing and they have a metric. Well, we hire 4 developers and we hire 1.5 QA people. And then I say, well, how many QA people do you have in infrastructure? And they kind of look at me like I'm weird. Like, well, what are you talking about QA people, right? It's a new thing. But more and more, even with cloud, because somebody still is responsible for that process of publishing. If you want to be a DevOps shop, you have to automate. And if you're automating and you're not automating test alongside it, you're going to end up in the Roadrunner cartoon with, over the edge of a cliff with your legs spinning. And congratulations, you've automated your ability to update 50,000 users who now can't work. That's going to go real well, real fast. So we just see that this push to automation absolutely demands a level of QA alongside it. Otherwise, you're kind of living on borrowed time.
I agree. I mean, some of it I have to, I chuckle at a little bit. I mean, I have a personal, I'll say, bad habit or passion that I am a pilot. I fly airplanes, and you don't just kind of get up in the air and kind of think, okay, yeah, everything's go good. There's checklists you go through. There's a lot of flight planning that you kind of think about to kind of get to the point when you are actually in the air, things go well. So when I hear things like this, it's like, same thing applies to the IT and kind of digital workspace environment, right? This kind of whole idea of having a checklist, having planning in place. And I look at this, where this matters most is it does start at the beginning, right, Richard? At the kind of planning stage, so you can get through and be able to migrate more efficiently, be able to handle that continuous change, and be able to, at the end of the day, everything today is being measured on an SLA with bigger lens than I've ever seen in the past.
100%. Bringing this back to kind of our company, Login VSI, early on in our history, we were known for, stage one here. We were the planning tool, right? People bought our product to do load testing, used it for a while, came up with their metrics, and then put it away and maybe took it out again 12 or 18 months later. Then as migrations to other platforms, that's seen as a major change. So again, maybe you pulled it out and you used it there. With the change in the market and certainly the changes in our product, really what we're seeing is this huge adoption of this continuous testing, essentially, making QA part of your pipeline process, and not QA from the developer perspective, but an integrated build of your EUC image with all of your applications going through that testing process prior to and immediately after promotion into production, and then on a continuous sampling basis. I visited the Ben & Jerry's factory one time. They don't taste every bucket of ice cream, but they pull one off the line every now and again. And believe it or not, somebody's got a job of tasting that batch of ice cream. It's a little bit like that. You want to be sampling on a continuous basis to understand. But SLAs tend to get kind of short shrift in this process sometimes. And a lot of businesses now are looking to sell services to other affiliates. Like if you're in a big hospital, you most likely have small clinics that are consuming things like Epic or Cerner from you, and very little ways to demonstrate to that audience what they're getting for that spend. Similarly, if you're in a call center business, either consuming it or providing it, how do you provide data to your buyer or your customer that says, look, we're delivering this service. I spend a little bit of time in the call center industry, and they know exactly how many calls an agent should do in an hour, a week, a day, et cetera. If your application slows down by 7%, agent's probably not going to pick up the phone and say, I'm having a really bad day, but that's 7% fewer calls. So if they're doing 100 calls a day, now the 7 calls they can't do times 1,000 agents, that's 7,000 calls. That's a whole bunch. That's 70 more people that need to be hired because that application slowed down by 7%. And even if you say, Richard, your math's all fuzzy, I guarantee you it's 5 or 10 people that need to get hired, right? Yeah. Otherwise you end up on the phone saying, please wait, we're real busy at the moment. So we see SLAs as kind of the untapped gold mine of data that's available from good testing.
And you're inferring it without saying it, but I mean, there's this notion of being able to be reactive or be proactive, right? As opposed to being reactive, right? Absolutely. Being able to, recognize something or some change or something that may not be working as well as it should be, and be able to be proactive against that. So should somebody's performance be dipping, you're able to recognize that ahead of time. So the next person next to them, their performance doesn't dip, right? Absolutely. And be able to say, okay, I've been able to capture that sooner, as opposed to reacting, looking at, okay, that light's yellow, let me go to lunch, and let me get to that later, and then be met with red lights afterwards.
100%. To your last slide, if you had automation testing 100 things and 92% of them or 92 out of the 100 passed, now you only have to spend time focused on that 8 and understanding why are these creating a problem and impact. Trying to figure out the detail there versus skimming across 100 by hand. It's just night and day in terms of what you can accomplish and the likelihood that you're going to catch an issue before it goes out to your users.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. I am curious, we talked about a lot of things on here and kind of some of the benefits across the bottom there. Where have you traditionally kind of seen your customers get started? Yeah. Meaning, is it an organizational change? Is it somebody that's driving from a technology? Like, what are some of those kind of magic things that you see happening?
It's really starting to change a lot, Mark. It's a great question. Yeah. Again, early on, we were the load testing tool for the EUC folks, and people outside that group really didn't know us. And the metric was price per user per, VDI or per virtual desktop. Probably about 3 years ago, we started getting calls from that head of desktop, head of end user computing, thinking beyond VDI to the whole desktop and saying, Yeah, it's great to drive down the price. That's really important. You have to be cost neutral if I'm going to buy this product. But what I'm really focused on is I want to make sure I don't roll out bad updates to my users, because we have an airline customer and they would roll out changes, and suddenly not the big airports, they have IT folks, but these secondary airports would be offline in the morning when folks would show up, and now that plane doesn't take off and it ripples through for the whole day. So about 3 years ago, the focus shift to let's not put out bad updates. But I would say in the last 12 months, it's all been about time. It's all been about, we got to go faster. We've got to get these 0-day vulnerabilities deployed. We've got to get this DevOps, this last inch in the DevOps cycle, closed off. If we don't, there's no point in saying we've got a 2-week DevOps cycle if it takes me 6 weeks to get that icon updated on your desktop. By definition, it's 8 weeks. So how do we close that off? And we are seeing that pressure more and more. And so as a result of that, our buyer is changing, not just from the EUC folks, but now all the way up the organization and across into the application groups. We're seeing application owners beginning to understand that it's not okay to simply say, hey, it's ready. They have an obligation to ensure that they're not going to create damage to some other part of the ecosystem when they roll out their change as well.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. Unfortunately, I think they're going to kick us off the stage here, Richard. But I certainly appreciate Login BSI having ESG participate here. And I know you and I could talk about this for ages.
Absolutely.
And but continue to absolutely see the success in the market and great things that you guys are doing. And congratulations on the funding as well. That's great.
Thanks very much. Yeah, it's a very exciting day for us. We're very happy to see the progress that we're making, and of course, all due to our customers. We really appreciate all the folks who've stuck with us, and looking forward to adding lots more. Thanks, Mark.